The rain pounded against the windshield, blurring the neon-lit streets of New York. Jack Turner, a worn-out taxi driver in his late 40s, gripped the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road. Another night. Another shift. Jack had been driving the streets for nearly 20 years, but it never got easier. The city never slept, and neither did its ghosts. The crackle of his radio snapped him back to reality. Unit 42, we need a cab at Mercy General Hospital. Kid needs a ride. Jack sighed. A kid? At this hour? Where to? He asked, pressing the radio button. A pause. Unknown. He's alone. Jack frowned. Other drivers would ignore a call like this. No confirmed fare, no money. But something in his gut told him to take it. He grabbed the radio. On my way. Jack pulled up to the emergency entrance of Mercy General Hospital. A nurse stood at the curb, her arms crossed. Beside her, a small boy sat on the bench, hugging a worn-out backpack to his chest. Jack stiffened. The kid couldn't be older than 8 or 9. His hair was damp, clinging to his forehead. His oversized hoodie swallowed his small frame. Jack rolled down the window. You need a ride? The nurse exhaled. He was brought in alone. No family, no ID. She glanced at the boy. He won't tell us his name. Just says he's waiting for someone. Jack's gaze dropped to the boy, who stared at his shoes. Something about him felt familiar. Jack sighed. Kid, you got anywhere to go? The boy hesitated, then nodded. My dad's coming. The nurse frowned. That's what he kept saying. But we checked. No one's coming for him. Jack's chest tightened. He'd seen this before. A kid left behind, waiting for someone who was never going to show up. The boy shivered. Jack exhaled. Get in. The kid hesitated. Then slowly he climbed into the back seat. Jack watched him in the mirror. Something wasn't right. But he had a job to do. He put the car in drive and pulled into the rain, not knowing that this ride would change his life forever. Jack adjusted the rearview mirror, his eyes flicking to the small figure curled up in the back seat. The boy didn't speak. He just stared out the rain-streaked window, his thin fingers clutching the straps of his backpack like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Jack had picked up all kinds of people in his 20 years behind the wheel. Drunks, runaways, lost souls. But something about this kid felt different, and that made Jack uneasy. Where to, kid? Jack sighed, keeping his voice as neutral as possible. You got an address? The boy hesitated. Then, almost whispering, My dad's coming. Jack frowned. The nurse had already said no one was coming for him. You sure about that? The kid nodded. Jack tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. All right. But until he does, you need somewhere to go. Silence. Jack sighed. All right, kid. You hungry? The boy hesitated again, then nodded. Jack didn't know what he was getting himself into, but he pulled into the first late-night diner he saw. A meal in silence. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease. Jack led the boy to a booth in the back, away from the few stragglers nursing their midnight meals. A waitress, Maggie, walked up. She knew Jack. He was a regular. She raised an eyebrow at the kid. New trainee? She joked. Jack shook his head. Just get him a grilled cheese. Maggie smirked. And for you? Jack exhaled. Coffee. Black. As she walked away, Jack turned to the boy. You got a name? The kid hesitated. Then quietly, Eli. Jack nodded. All right, Eli. You want to tell me where you're supposed to be? Eli picked at the edge of the table. My dad told me to wait. Jack's jaw clenched. And where is he? Eli didn't answer. Jack leaned forward. Kid, I need the truth here. Eli's eyes flickered with something, fear. And suddenly Jack knew. This kid wasn't waiting for his dad. He was hoping for him, and that was a big difference. A man who knew too well. Jack looked away, swallowing the lump in his throat, because he knew what that was like. Waiting for someone who was never going to show. Being a kid, sitting by the window, convincing yourself that maybe, just maybe, this time they'd keep their promise. He had been Eli's age when his own father walked out. And now, years later, he was staring at a kid who could have been him. Jack exhaled. Kid, listen. If your dad... Bam. The diner door slammed open. 2 men stepped inside, scanning the booths. Jack's instincts screamed. Something about them felt off. Then, one of them locked eyes with Eli, and the boy's entire body went rigid. Jack saw it. Fear. The kind you didn't fake, the kind that meant run, the escape. Jack acted before he could think. He grabbed Eli's wrist. Time to go. The kid didn't argue. Jack threw some cash on the table and pulled Eli toward the back exit, just as the 2 men started moving toward them. Eli's grip tightened around his backpack as they burst into the alley. Jack shoved open the cab door. In! Now! Eli scrambled inside. Jack jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the gas. As they sped off, he glanced in the mirror. The 2 men stood in the alley watching them go. Not running, not chasing, just watching. Like they already knew this wasn't over. Jack's gut twisted. He had no idea what he had just stepped into. But one thing was clear. This kid was in trouble, and Jack wasn't about to leave him behind. Not this time. Jack gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white as the city lights blurred past. Eli sat in the back seat, his small hands clenched around his backpack. He was breathing fast, shoulders hunched, as if he was bracing for something. Jack exhaled sharply. All right, kid. Time to start talking. Eli didn't answer. Jack glanced at the mirror, meeting the boy's wide, scared eyes. Who were those guys? Eli shook his head. I don't know. Jack's stomach twisted. The kid was lying. He knew exactly who they were, and that meant Jack was in deep trouble. The motel safe house. Jack pulled into a rundown motel off the main road. It wasn't the best place, but it was quiet. And right now, quiet was all they needed. Jack parked, killed the engine, and turned to Eli. Come on, we need to lay low. Eli hesitated. His grip on his backpack tightened. Jack softened his tone. Kid, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Eli finally nodded. They stepped into the dimly lit lobby, the old man at the front desk barely glancing up as Jack paid in cash. Room 6B. A single flickering light bulb buzzed as they entered. Jack locked the door, pulling the curtain shut. Eli climbed onto the bed, hugging his knees to his chest. Jack sat across from him. All right, kid. No more games. Who are you running from? Eli looked away. Jack rubbed his temples. Eli, listen. I don't have a dad. Jack froze. Eli's voice was quiet, shaky. He left when I was little. My mom, she got sick. Jack's chest tightened. Eli swallowed hard. She said someone was coming for me, but she never told me who. Jack felt a cold chill run through him. This wasn't just a kid waiting for a missing father. This was a kid on the run from something bigger, something dangerous. And Jack had just put himself in the middle of it. A connection to the past. Jack leaned forward. Kid, where's your mom now? Eli's eyes glossed over. She died. Jack felt a familiar ache in his chest. He had lost people too. And now, this kid, alone, scared, with no one looking for him except the wrong people. Jack had a choice. He could walk away, or he could do what no one did for him when he was Eli's age. Jack sighed. All right, kid, you're staying with me for now. Eli's eyes widened. Really? Jack nodded. But we need to figure out what the hell is going on. And fast. Because if those men found them again, Jack wasn't sure they'd get a second chance to run. A visitor in the dark. Later that night, Jack sat by the window, a cigarette hanging between his fingers. He hadn't smoked in years, but tonight, he needed something to keep his hands from shaking. Eli was asleep on the bed, curled up under the blanket. Jack stared out at the parking lot. Then, a black SUV pulled in. Jack's pulse spiked. His instincts screamed. Slowly, the driver's side door opened. A man in a suit stepped out. Jack couldn't see his face, but he knew. They had found them. Jack stood fast, moving toward Eli. He grabbed the kid's shoulder, shaking him awake. "Eli, we have to go. Now." The boy's eyes shot open. Jack grabbed his keys. Then, a knock at the door. Jack's breath caught. Silence. Then a voice. "Jack Turner. Open up." Jack's blood ran cold. Whoever they were, they knew his name. And that meant this wasn't just about Eli anymore. This was about him too. The motel room was silent, except for the soft buzzing of the broken light bulb. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. "Jack Turner. Open up." Whoever was on the other side of that door knew him. That was bad. Jack had spent years staying invisible. He had no family, no ties, no reason for anyone to come looking for him. Until tonight. Until Eli. He glanced at the boy, who sat frozen on the bed, his breath shaky. Jack put a finger to his lips, signaling him to stay quiet. Then he grabbed the gun from his duffel bag. He hadn't needed it in years, but old habits die hard. Slowly, he crept toward the door. Another knock. "Jack, we just want to talk." Jack swallowed hard. Lies. People who just wanted to talk didn't show up at midnight in black SUVs. Jack pressed himself against the wall and peered through the peephole. A man in his 50s, suit crisp despite the rain, stood just outside. His hands were empty, no weapon in sight. But his eyes, they were the kind of eyes that had seen things, the kind of eyes that had done things. Jack took a deep breath. This was a mistake. He should have dropped the kid off at a shelter, should have driven away the moment he saw those men in the diner. But something in his gut told him that this wasn't just about Eli anymore. It was about him too. Jack flicked the safety off his gun. Then, he unlocked the door. You're the man with too many secrets. The door swung open just enough for Jack to get a good look. The man smiled, like they were old friends. Jack Turner. It's been a long time. Jack's stomach twisted. He had never seen this man before. And yet, something about him felt familiar. Jack kept his grip firm on the gun, hidden behind the door. "Who the hell are you?" The man sighed, like he was disappointed. "You don't remember me, do you?" Jack stiffened. The man's eyes flicked past him, toward the dimly lit motel room. "You should let me in. We have a lot to discuss." Jack shook his head. "We're fine talking right here." The man's smile didn't fade, but his voice lowered. "I know who the boy is, Jack." Jack's breath caught. "Eli." Jack didn't react, but the man saw it in his eyes. "That's right," the man said softly. "I know why he's running. I know why they're after him." Jack's fingers tightened around the gun. "And I know," the man continued, "that you've been lied to your whole life." Jack's chest tightened. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't just need to protect him, Jack. You need to protect yourself." Jack's mind raced. This wasn't just about Eli. It was about him too, and the past he had spent his whole life trying to forget. The past comes calling. Jack slammed the door shut and locked it. His hands were shaking. Eli sat on the bed staring at him. "Jack, who was that?" Jack ran a hand over his face. "I don't know, but I'm damn sure gonna find out." Eli's voice was small. "He knew about me, didn't he?" Jack hesitated. Then, finally, he nodded. Eli swallowed hard. What if he was telling the truth? Jack's stomach twisted, because that was the problem. A part of him already knew the man was telling the truth. Something was off. Jack had always assumed he was just another guy who had fallen through the cracks. A nobody. But what if that wasn't true? What if his past was bigger than he remembered? And what if Eli was the key to unlocking it? Jack exhaled sharply. "Get your stuff, kid. We're leaving." Eli scrambled off the bed. "Where are we going?" Jack grabbed his bag, checked the gun, and looked out the window. The black SUV was still there, waiting. Jack's jaw tightened. To find some answers, Jack gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing as he sped through the empty streets. Eli sat beside him, his small hands clenched into fists, his backpack hugged against his chest like a shield. They had been running all night. But now, it was time to stop running. It was time to find out the truth. The last stop. Jack pulled into an abandoned parking lot, the headlights cutting through the misty air. This was it. The address on the card. The one the man in the black SUV had left for him. Jack didn't trust him. But he knew one thing. If he didn't walk through those doors, he'd be spending the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. He turned to Eli. "You don't have to go in." Eli shook his head. "I want to know." Jack hesitated. Then he nodded, and together they stepped into the darkness. The man with too many secrets. The building was an old office, abandoned for years. The air was thick with dust and memories. And there, sitting behind a metal desk in the dim light, was him. The man from the motel. He looked up as they entered, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You came?" Jack's jaw tightened. "You have 60 seconds to tell me why the hell we're here." The man chuckled. "Still as impatient as ever, huh?" Jack stiffened. "We've never met." The man's smile faded. "Haven't we?" Jack's pulse spiked. There was something off about the way he said it, like he knew something Jack didn't. And then, the man pushed a file across the desk. Jack's hands shook as he opened it, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A past he never knew. The file was thick. Old photographs, official-looking documents, medical records. And right there, staring back at him, was a photo of himself. But not just any photo. A childhood photo. One he didn't recognize. Jack's throat went dry. "What the hell is this?" The man sighed. "It's your life, Jack." Jack's hands curled into fists. My life started when I was 8 years old in a foster home. Everything before that is missing," the man finished. Jack froze. His mind reeled, because he had never questioned it. He had always assumed he was just another forgotten kid who fell through the cracks. But what if he wasn't? What if someone had erased his past? Eli's voice was small. "Jack, what does this mean?" Jack swallowed hard. It meant his whole life had been a lie. The connection. Jack turned to the man, his voice shaking. "What does this have to do with Eli?" The man's eyes darkened. "Because, Jack." He pulled out another photo, and when Jack saw it, the world tilted. It was a photo of Eli, and beside him, a woman, Eli's mother. Jack's chest tightened, because he knew her, not from the past few days, not from the hospital, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere buried. And suddenly, Jack understood. He and Eli weren't just connected now. They had always been connected, even before they met. Jack's breath hitched. The man leaned forward. "You weren't just some orphan, Jack. You were taken." Jack's hands shook as he stared at the photograph. Eli sat frozen, his breath coming in short gasps. The woman beside him, Eli's mother, was someone Jack had seen before, not in the past few days, not in passing, but in his own forgotten memories. A life that wasn't his. Jack's voice came out hoarse. You're lying. The man behind the desk, his expression grim, shook his head. I wish I was. Jack's fingers curled into fists. I don't remember any of this. That's the point, the man said quietly. Jack's stomach twisted. What the hell does that mean? The man sighed. Jack, you were part of something you were never supposed to escape from. Jack's breath caught. Escape. The word hit something deep inside him, because now, tiny fragments of memories were slipping through the cracks. A dark room, a hand gripping his wrist, a voice whispering, Run, Jack, run, and never look back. Jack's head pounded. This wasn't just about Eli. This was about him, and the life he was never supposed to remember. Forgotten experiment. The man pushed another file toward Jack. You and Eli, you were both a part of the same program. Jack's chest tightened. A program? The man nodded. A government-funded project, unofficial, off the books. A way to create, well, let's just say people who wouldn't be missed. Jack felt sick. People who wouldn't be missed. Kids. Like him. Like Eli. He clenched his jaw. You're telling me we were taken, the man finished, raised in controlled environments, moved from home to home, given new identities. Some of you were meant to disappear into society. Others, he hesitated. Jack's stomach dropped. Others what? The man exhaled. Others didn't make it. Jack felt the room spin. His entire life, he had believed he was just another orphan, lost in the system. But he wasn't. He had been manufactured, a ghost before he even knew who he was. And Eli was supposed to be next. The people who never stopped watching. Jack gritted his teeth. So why now? Why is Eli running? Why are they after him? The man tapped the file. Eli's mother, she tried to expose them. Jack's pulse spiked. What? She figured it out. Who he was, who you were, and she tried to get him out. Jack turned to Eli, whose eyes were wide with shock. Your mom, Jack whispered. She was trying to protect you. Eli's lips trembled. She never told me. Jack's heart clenched. She couldn't. The man leaned forward. They silenced her before she could. But the fact that Eli's still alive means she got far enough. Jack exhaled sharply. They killed her. The man didn't answer. He didn't have to. Jack already knew. Eli was never supposed to make it out. Neither was Jack. And now, the people who had built them, erased them, controlled them, were coming to finish the job. Jack looked at Eli. The kid's small hands gripped his backpack like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Tears burned at the edges of his wide, scared eyes. Jack took a slow breath. And at that moment he made a choice. They could run. They could keep hiding, waiting for the inevitable. Or they could end this. Jack turned back to the man. You have a name? The man smirked. Call me Warren. Jack's jaw tightened. How do we stop them? Warren leaned back. You don't. Jack's grip tightened. Wrong answer. Warren exhaled. Jack, you don't understand. These people don't just disappear. They don't have names. They don't have records. They exist in the cracks of the world. And that's exactly where they want to keep you. Jack folded his arms. So you're saying there's no way out? Warren hesitated. Then quietly, there's a way out. But you won't like it. Jack stared him down. I'm listening. The escape plan. Warren opened a second file. Inside, Jack saw 2 passports. One for him, one for Eli. New names, new identities. A one-way ticket to somewhere no one would ever find them. Jack's pulse pounded. He had spent his whole life fighting ghosts. Was this really the answer? To run? To start over? Again? His instincts screamed no. But then he looked at Eli. At the kid who had no one. The kid who had already lost too much. Jack exhaled. He wasn't running for himself anymore. He was running for Eli. An hour later, Jack and Eli stood at a small private airstrip, the city lights blinking in the distance. A plane waited on the tarmac. Eli looked up at Jack. Are we really doing this? Jack nodded. Eli swallowed. But what if they find us? Jack rested a hand on his shoulder. They won't. And for the first time in years, Jack actually believed it. Eli sniffed, then hesitated. Jack? Jack looked down. The kid's voice was soft. You saved me. Jack's throat tightened. He shook his head. No, kid. You saved me. Epilogue. A new beginning. The plane lifted off, leaving the city and their old lives behind. Jack didn't know what came next, didn't know what kind of life they were flying toward. But for the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.